Welcome back to my nightmare. We're here with chapter 4 and chapter 5 of Vane Attraction. I'm sorry I got a little weepy at the end of the last chapter. It's just, it's hard sometimes when you write something about your own life experience and you're like, I can totally fictionalize this and capitalize on it. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that because now I'm sad every time I look at it. I'm going to have to look at it a lot. Whew. So sorry I got a little sad there for a second. But now we're getting into the good stuff. Chapter 4 and chapter 5. So hopefully we've got some good stuff for you. Again, just a reminder, this book does deal with the death of a grandparent. This book deals with mention of cancer. This book deals with internalized homophobia and regular homophobia a little bit. I think we got that out all the way in the last chapter. And then if I see anything too spicy, I won't read it for you. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 should be okay. When we get to chapter 6 and 7, that's usually where I put the spice scene. Can't quite remember. It's been a while since I wrote this. So as you can tell, it's set during the pandemic, and it has definitely been a couple years since the pandemic. So anyway, chapter 4 and chapter 5 of Vane Attraction by Avery Morstan. Thank you for coming to this New Year's Eve slumber party with me, even though you're reading it in March. Chapter 4. The rest of the appointment went without a hitch. Once Grandma had been released into the wild and all but escorted out of the salon by the kid's embarrassed mom, Vane had kicked back to watch Hannah work. Her skills were impeccable, of course, and that's why Vane had hired her. But watching the way she comforted the kid and helped them feel at ease when nothing about their journey was going to be easy, well, Kai left with pink shaved sides wolf cut that matched their plaid bondage pants. Vane always said, grow up into the adult you wish you'd had when you were a kid, and Hannah was a shining example of that motto. The second the kid has paid and gone, Vane yanked Hannah through the salon and out back into the alley. What the fuck was that, Hannah? Vane asked, her lips definitely not twitching into a smirk. Yes, the transformation Hannah had undergone in just a few seconds when the child had walked through the door was breathtaking, to say the least. And as someone who hadn't had the most accepting family, Vane could understand why Hannah had done it, obviously. But she still wanted to hear those pretty pink lips explain themselves. Hannah's cheeks tinted pink over her mask. That grandmother was heinous. Vane's smirk widened. Yes, and? Hannah's eyes flashed angrily. She reached into her pocket for a hair tie and started trying to tame her wild curls. Sometimes, you never know what a lack of support might do to a person. Children need encouragement, not some homophobic bullshit that makes them feel too scared or too ashamed to express themselves. Vane wondered if Hannah was talking from personal experience. She knew too well what it was like when different kinds of negative thoughts could whisper around when you didn't feel loved. With a sigh, she put her hands on Hannah's shoulders and turned her so Hannah's back was to Vane. With her skilled, nimble fingers, she gently freed Hannah's mane from its messy ponytail and started to smooth those white blonde curls into something more stylish. She could appreciate Hannah's casual, and by casual, Vane meant definitely non-existent approach to hair and makeup, but they were in the beauty industry for fuck's sake. I'm so used to writing something else, I almost slipped there. And it says for fuck's sake, but we all know what I write in my off hours. That was accidental. Anyway, I'm so sorry, I just sniffed in your ear. Not to mention how it felt so good to be taking care of Hannah in return for Hannah taking care of someone else. Vane was quiet for a moment while she worked, but eventually she spoke again. Okay, I get it. But what if the old woman had custody and she does something nasty to your new friend once they get home? But she didn't. I checked with the mom before I started the service, Hannah said. God, even her annoyed voice was precious. Patting her newly plaited hair, Hannah turned around and looked at Vane with a fragile expression in her eyes and tension along her jaw that hinted at shyness. Something important was about to happen, wasn't it? Do you think you could cut my hair after the shop closes for the day? I hate to ask. I shouldn't ask. You've had so much on your plate, but it's driving me crazy. And Vane reached out and gripped Hannah's hand. She squeezed it, hoping to cut off this rambling before it got too out of control. After the performance that Hannah had exhibited today on behalf of one small non-binary child, abso-fucking-lutely. Sure, just a trim. More like a whole hack. It's a lot, I know. And I get it if you don't want to do it, but I was just thinking Hannah used her free hand to fish her phone from her back pocket. Something like this. It was a photo of a girl wearing a button-up shirt with extremely short cropped curls. Vane's eyes widened. Fuck, Hannah. That's a lot. Vane breathed. Hannah's hair, as it was, reached down past her shoulders and headed for her waist. This was a pixie cut. Vane looked over at Hannah. Are you sure? Hannah's lips twisted from side to side as she considered. She took a deep breath and nodded. I'm sure. Vane thought about her clothes and the subtle changes she'd been seeing in the stylist over the course of the last few months. I know Scott could be kind of homophobic himself. Did he keep you from getting the dyke haircut of your dreams? You think this is a dyke haircut? Hannah asked, and the rose shade in her cheeks turned into a deep crimson. She frowned. Then she tilted her head up and scowled. There's no such thing as a dyke haircut. It's just a haircut on a dyke. Vane's eyebrows shot up to her hairline. She never expected to hear Hannah say it out loud. She grinned. It's a cute haircut. I'd be happy to help. She couldn't very well commend Hannah on doing what it took to make her client happy, only to turn around and deny her in a moment when she needed help the most. Oh, really? Hannah grinned, and Vane almost felt annoyed that she'd ever doubted that Vane would help her. Thank you. Hannah got up on her tiptoes and pressed a kiss to Vane's cheek. Vane's lips parted. As quick and surprising as the gesture was, it did things to her. Surprising things. And she had to choke on a little gasp before Hannah pulled away to continue beaming at her like a little star. Vane managed to rein her face back into her trained, grumpy scowl. Of course, you're stylist. You should have the hair that's going to help you feel the most confident, not what some stuffy old boss thinks is ladylike. Hannah grinned wider and nodded. Excellent. Should get back inside. I've got a color client due any minute. Vane was too charmed by Hannah, she thought, as she watched the other woman walk back inside, bouncing as if her feet were made of clouds. This was entirely dangerous. Vane had a couple of clients before she could get to Hannah's cut, which was annoying because all she wanted was to get her fingers into Hannah's soft curls. Sadly, before Hannah, there was Tate. Tate was one of those people you either loved or hated, but there never seemed to be any in between. The crew of devils seemed to like them well enough, and Vane knew that they were friends with some of the locals, but they'd been fired from most of the surrounding businesses for their attitude. They had been coming to Vane for a long time for what they called the quintessential non-binary cut, which meant long and curled on top but shaved on the sides. They could be funny, almost sweet, or they could be sardonic and hard to handle. Vane liked their money, but she hadn't made up her mind about them as a person. She was pretty sure they were friends, or would be if Tate wasn't her client. Make it quick, eh? I got places to be, Tate said, arching an eyebrow as they slumped down into Vane's chair. They lifted a leg and propped one booted foot on Vane's station, which Vane kicked down immediately. She raised an eyebrow at them. Feeling frisky today? She asked. Baby, I'm always frisky, Tate said. They were joking. They were always joking. That was probably why so many people didn't like them. If you were bad at reading people, you weren't going to see the laughter in Tate's eyes, or the way they used humor to keep everyone at arm's reach. Get fucked. Same as always? Vane asked, moving to the hair. Tate grinned up at her as she snapped a cape around their neck. Out of the corner of her eye, Vane could have sworn she saw Hannah looking something off. What was with her? You know what I like, Tate flirted. Vane flicked on her clippers with a threatening glare. Tate winked. Kita is threatening my life if I don't update my latest fanfic tonight. She really wants the new chapter. I told her as soon as you were through with me, I'd go over to Devil's and get some writing time in. That was a lie. Interesting, Vane thought. Well, I'll probably see you there after I close up shop, Vane said. As she spoke again, she caught Hannah freezing up as she tidied around the shampoo station. Did Hannah have a problem with Tate? She had non-binary clients herself, so it couldn't possibly be that Tate was using they, them pronouns, right? Sorry. Careful. I think Jesse had another audition this weekend. I've got a bad feeling, Tate said quietly. I know it's been rough for them. There might be drama if he stops by. Jesse doesn't scare me, Vane teased. She carefully trimmed at the overgrown sides of Tate's head, stopping just before the back. Want me to leave it a mullet? You'd look fantastic with a mullet. As much as I always want to look gayer, I think we both know why that's a bad idea, Tate said, tilting their head up as they eyed themselves in the mirror. Halloween is coming up, Vane pointed out, but she continued trimming the back of Tate's head. The 80s vampire look would suit you. Tate snorted. I don't doubt it. Vane wasn't sure what everyone else knew, but she'd had Tate in her chair long enough that she knew their parents were bigoted assholes. Sadly, Tate's inability to keep their foot out of their mouth resulted in changing jobs just enough times that they could never seem to get a security deposit together in order to leave their house. Part of her job as a stylist seemed to be keeping everyone's secrets, so she never said anything to their mutual friends, but sometimes she wished she could start a crowdfunding thing to get Tate a new home. She put down the clippers after edging Tate's neck a little and picked up the spray bottle. She spritzed down the top of their head and started to trim. As she lifted the hair, she happened to glance over at Hannah. Hannah's cheeks were bright pink over her mask, and she was definitely polishing the same bottle of shampoo that she'd been polishing 5 minutes ago. Vane pursed her lips. Tate was watching Vane watching Hannah. Speaking as an author of romantic fanfic, Tate said, in a voice that made Vane want to stab them in the throat. Bad fanfic. And an ace author, anyway, Vane said with a frown. Hey, ace does not mean by default sex repulsed. I know about romance and all the shit that comes with it, Tate said defensively. It made Vane wonder if that was actually true. She's jealous. Vane's eyes snapped back to Hannah. There was no way. Ooh, it's a typo. There was no way she could possibly be jealous. Hannah wasn't looking at them, but her posture did seem a little off. You're crazy, Vane muttered. She turned back to Tate and started trimming the longer top pieces. It wasn't that she wasn't confident. She was confident. She knew that she was pretty attractive, no qualifiers needed. She took care of herself, not in that kind of bullshit Instagram fitness influencer way. As she edged out of her 30s, there was a softness to her body that she wasn't used to. But she'd always been taller than most other girls, and she was a cosmetologist, so she needed to have her hair done, her nails perfect, and her makeup on. She looked good, and she knew it. Did Hannah think she looked good? The idea made her shiver. She's cute, Vane. Don't wait too long, Tate said, giving her a lascivious wink. Get bent, Tate, Vane replied. I have a date later. I just might, Tate chuckled, knowing full well that they had no intention of getting bent or fucked anytime soon. They winked again and headed out. Hannah had been sweeping up around Vane's station while she checked Tate out, and now she hovered nervously near her chair waiting for her turn. Are you sure? If you're too tired, Hannah started, but Vane waved her off. Get a cape, she said. She thought better of her tone for a second and tried to gentle it with an added, and you don't have to sweep for me. I'm not Scott. I can handle myself without an assistant. But it might be nice to have someone help you anyway, Hannah replied pointedly. Well, it didn't hurt, that's for sure. Speaking of nice, Vane teased. She picked up her favorite shears and was rocking them back and forth along a leather cleaning cloth. Hannah's eyes were definitely tracking the movement of her hand. Go get cozy in the bowl. I'll wash you out first. Oh, that's so much effort. You could just spray it down, Hannah said. The way her adorable eyes widened at the idea of someone shampooing her hair was just precious. Vane grinned. We're helping each other. Now let's get you all wet, Vane said, leading her in the direction of the shampoo area. The small gasp that Hannah made at that joke, part affronted, part something else entirely, was worth it. Hannah leaned back in the shampoo chair, and Vane started to warm up the water gently, swishing the nozzle back and forth. Just the sound of that is nice, Hannah breathed. Vane smiled. One of the places I worked at before I worked with Scott showed me this technique. It's a little hypnotizing, listening to the water of the sound near one ear and then the other, Vane said softly. Quote, the shampoo experience, as the other salon had always called it, was supposed to be your time to relax and get your clients was supposed to be your time to relax your clients and get them all warmed up to hand over their wallets for services. Or that's how it always seemed for Vane. In reality, she also enjoyed giving her clients a few minutes to chill and forget their troubles while she washed out their hair. Oh, Hannah breathed in a way that made Vane squirm as the water hit her scalp. That's perfect. How did you know? I know you, Vane wanted to say, but instead her mouth supplied, I'm a professional. It's my job to know. She wanted to make this good for Hannah. She wanted to take care of someone, for God's sake, the way she should have... Best save that thought for a future therapist, honestly. She could focus on this, on now, and how after staring at Hannah's ass for a whole summer, she was going to have those luxurious locks in her hair, in her chair. Well, you're very, very good, Hannah said in a low voice that shot straight to Vane's libido. She flushed under her mask and started to lather up Hannah's hair. Oh my God. Vane's lips twitched to the side in a cocky smile. Hannah's eyes stayed closed, but it looked like she was making a considerable effort. Good? Vane was entirely proud of her massage technique. It had taken a while, but the way she used her thumbs to go down the center of the head and then back along the parietal ridge and up to the sides was something that not many other people would think to do. She wasn't scrubbing like Hannah was a puppy at the groomer's. She was working the product through with all of her fingers and a firm, constant pressure. Christ, Hannah breathed, and Vane's heart soared at the blasphemy. You're amazing at that. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Vane said. Hannah was enjoying it, and she enjoyed the conditioner, too. Once the purple-tinted product was washed away, she wrapped a towel around Hannah's hair and helped her stand. I don't know if I can feel my feet again after that, Hannah teased. She did look a bit shaky, but she was up and walking towards Vane's chair. I used some of the purple conditioner to bring out your natural tones, Vane said, as she gently squeezed the towel over Hannah's hair so as not to rough up the cuticle. Once Hannah was settled, she pulled her mask up over her eyes, exposing those beautiful, full lips. Things Vane would not think about when she was on her own time. 1. Hannah, blindfolded. What are you doing? Hannah asked. Well, I'm wearing a mask, and we've been in close contact, so I'm pretty sure I'm not at risk. I want this to be a surprise for you, Vane told her. The way Hannah's breath quickened made Vane swallow. Now, be a good girl and sit still for me. Whatever you say, boss, Hannah replied, her voice rough and low. Vane had to bite her lip to get her brain to work again. The cut went smoothly. Of course it did. Vane was incredibly skilled. She was proud of the abilities she'd honed in her decades in the industry, and while she cut, Hannah talked. My family isn't so awful, actually. They think styling hair is beneath me. My mom constantly complains about how well I did in school and how I should have been something more substantial like a teacher or a writer, but I like doing hair, Hannah said. Vane lifted section after section, cutting heavy curls and shaping what was left. I got bullied a lot in school, though, and I just felt there was a gap in the industry for queer voices. We deserve safe places and technicians who can help us feel safe. I was wondering if you were giving yourself a dyke makeover for a reason, Vane said as she started to work on the top section of Hannah's hair. The urge to take her time and keep Hannah in her chair as long as possible so it was just the two of them in this calm little bubble was overwhelming. You were wearing dresses, and then it's corduroy trousers and button-ups. You got very dapper almost overnight. I've just decided that without Scott's heteronormative dress code, I was finally free to express myself, Hannah said. She sighed. My mother hates it, but luckily, I don't have to see her every day. Well, you look good in a bow tie, sugar, Vane said. It had been one day in July when Hannah had come in wearing an honest-to-God bow tie and vest. Vane had almost choked. Thank you, Hannah said softly. Vane sniffed a few more strands in silence before reaching for the pomade she liked to use for soft masculine styles. Are you ready to remove your blindfold? Vane asked. Hannah's cheeks dusted again, and when she answered, Vane was not ready. I don't know. I rather like being blindfolded by you, Hannah said. Vane couldn't trust herself to respond. She simply reached around and slid the blindfold down. Hannah's face was exuberant. She was stunned. She was delighted. She was everything Vane could have hoped for. Her curls, which were more defined now that there wasn't so much weight pulling them down, framed her face like an angel's halo. It was white, curling cloud of perfection. Oh, Vane, Hannah said. It's perfect. No, that would be you, Vane wanted to say. She shrugged, lifted her lips in a cheeky smile, and said, I know. Chapter 5. Vane had only just sat down at one of the tables at Devil's with a decaf latte in hand when Jessie arrived, fresh from rejection. I give up, Jessie said loudly as he flopped down into a chair at Devil's. Jessie was Kita's boyfriend and an actor in the local community theater scene. Sadly, the small town of Quaint City just wasn't ready for a trans leading man. Both Kita and Vane were fresh off a long shift of being on their feet for hours on end with not enough breaks, and were not likely to be the sympathetic audience Jessie was hoping for. Kita barely managed to look up from her phone, her brows knitting together. Didn't get in? She asked. Yup, Jessie said, making sure to pop the P sarcastically. Vane raised an eyebrow and waited for an explanation. Jessie sighed. This director was mentoring me through the pandemic, really coaching me, and she said she wanted to do better about creating space for trans folks in theater. I thought that meant she was encouraging me to audition for her, but the cast list just came out and everyone is cis, and if I know the other actors like I do, straight. That's frustrating, Kita said. She reached out to grip Jessie's hand and gave it a loving squeeze, but her voice held a monotone quality that said, been there, done that, and the cast is probably all white too. In fact, it gets worse. They're all... Jessie held up their palm of their hand and tapped it, grimacing as they did. Kita rolled her eyes. Honey, I could have told you they were all going to be white, she said. It's one of the reasons I stopped going to auditions for you. This place is too small for people that look like us. Yeah, I know, but I'd hoped, Jessie groaned. It was a raspy, rumbling sound. Vane was pretty sure Kita had said Jessie started on hormone treatment. But even if he hadn't, he was making an effort to change his voice. You know perfectly damn good and well that they weren't going to cast you as a lead, if they cast you at all, Kita said in a tone dripping with disappointment, as if Jessie had done something particularly stupid. And at least you tried. You showed up for your community. We just need to find you a more accepting community. Why not here? Vane asked, raising her eyebrow. If their wide deer in headlights stare was any indication, they had both forgotten about her. She gestured around at them at Devil's, at the cozy atmosphere, and shrugged. Look, it's a pretty large space. Do some kind of immersive theater event and advertise it by releasing snippets on the Clock app, right? I bet Tate could help. They write, don't they? Y'all just did that poetry whatever the other night, and Eve said she wanted more events to happen. Do a themed show and cast your friends. Force the community to see you as a legitimate performer. Holy fuck, Jessie breathed full of awe. Kita was less impressed. Hold up. Kita, Jessie said excitedly, squeezing her hand and shaking it. Tate writes for the detective what's-his-name, the Loxley somethings. That's recognizable, and it's still in the public domain. Is Tate here? I gotta tell him. Eve's definitely gonna love this. Tate, be back in a sec, y'all. Vane was no casting expert, but she was pretty sure Jessie was not a Loxley type. Jessie had Bingley Golden Retriever boyfriend written all over him. He bound up and went in search of Tate, who was holed up in a far corner with their laptop in front of them. Vane was smiling until she caught Kita's eyes. What? I'm just worried about him is all, Kita said softly. He's been rejected so many times. I mean, I love him, but what if he's just a bad actor? Or what if we get hate crime for putting on some gay play? Or what if Eve says no? Do you think Eve's gonna say no? Vane asked, taking a sip from her latte. Kita scowled. No, I think she's going to eat this shit up, she admitted. She's been weird lately, though. Like, I don't want him getting all excited and then it falls through. What do you mean Eve's been weird? Vane asked. She's been getting on me to find my purpose or something. I've been really happy here. I mean, I'm manager. I've been really happy. I've been really happy being here. I mean, I'm manager, only I'm not her manager. She's being weird. That sentence was weird, let me tell you. I think the shop might be in trouble, Keita said, whispering the last part. Vane frowned. She was pretty sure the shop wasn't in trouble, or it shouldn't be. It was the only place in QC to get a coffee that didn't have a Mick in front of the name, and it was completely packed. Look, if she says no, I'll let them do it in the courtyard. They can even use the salon as a dressing room, Vane told her. We'll make it work, okay? I'm just tired of people putting other people down this week. I had to do something. Keita arched an eyebrow. His pronouns are he/him. And I see him dragging Tate into this, creating a collective them, Vane argued. I see Jesse for who he is. Trust me. My mom always said you can't trust anyone that isn't family, Keita replied. It was Vane's turn to arch an eyebrow. Yeah, and look how well that's working out for me. Keita smiled. You trust Hannah well enough. I don't have a choice. She's one of the best stylists in town. If it weren't for the stupid non-compete, she could work anywhere, Vane said. Non-compete? Pretty standard in the industry, and they don't usually hold up in court, but basically, her boss made her sign a contract saying she wouldn't work within a certain distance around his salon. I had one. My salon is 6 inches over the end of the line, and I know it pisses him off, Vane said with a devious snicker. Actually, I never signed mine, Hannah's voice said from over Vane's shoulder. Vane twisted in her seat to look back at Hannah, who was radiating an aura of smugness. She shrugged. It's one of the things that caused our falling out. He wanted the non-compete, and I told him it was nonsense, and I wasn't doing it. Good for you, girl. That's fucked up, Keita said. Why are you here? Vane asked, but she was interrupted by a commotion in the corner from where Jesse had been badgering Tate. Tate had pushed their chair back so loudly and stood up, closing their laptop with a firm snap that probably wasn't good for it. Jesse's face was pleading, but Tate's was a storm of emotion. But Tate, not after what you did with Aaron, Tate snapped. Denver didn't care. It's the principle of the thing. Jesse's face flicked from Tate to Keita and back again, his eyes incredibly hurt. But she was just a fling, and I apologize. Keita said we're cool. Tate, who was halfway out of the shop, turned and glared before biting out. Not on your life. Jesse didn't have the sense God gave a bedbug. He gestured to the rest of the cafe, who were all staring at the two of them. Look, it's like a floor show. They love it. Let's give the people what they love. I'm going to murder you, Tate said, and they stormed out of the coffee shop with Jesse tight on their heels. I mean, if that's the plot you're after, but I think murdering me would fall under the bury your gays thing and the audience would hate it, Jesse was saying. Hannah and Vane and Keita watched them both leave before Hannah slid down into the seat next to Vane. She shrugged. Forgot something at the salon. And you said you'd be here, she said, answering the question in Vane's eyes like a psychic. Vane had been wondering why Hannah was back after such a long day. Vane turned to Keita. Think Jesse will talk him into it? Possibly, she said, staring down at her phone in her hand. Vane frowned. You know, being a stylist is almost as good as being a therapist. If you wanted to talk about it, I could. It was nothing. We're open. There's going to be others. I'm just disappointed that's who they picked first, Keita grumbled. I'm dating someone else too. Just not a bitch who fucked over one of my friends. But baby needed to learn a few things, and I couldn't teach him that. Vane would have to fill Hannah in later on how Denver's ex, Aaron, had been a giant transphobic bitch up until she decided it was okay to screw around with Jesse. That seemed kind of like a later sort of talk, though. Okay, Vane said, twisting her lips to the side. The firm tone suggested that Keita did not want to talk about it further, which was fine, but also had Vane a little worried. She sighed. You want to date me? Not on your fucking life, Keita said. She looked up from her phone without actually looking up. You're a mess. True. I'm hot, though, Vane said with a wink. She was really just teasing because Keita seemed to need it. So she laid on a thick wink. Kita laughed and returned to her phone. Believe you me, I know where your heart is even if you don't, Kita said with a not so subtle glance at Hannah. Vane blushed. You want to get out of here? Vane asked, deciding to ignore Kita for her own good. I don't want to go home yet, and I could use something stronger than coffee. Sure, sounds good to me, Hannah said. She smiled at Kita. You want to come with us? Nah, you kids go ahead. I've got things to do, she replied. Vane rolled her eyes. She stood and then offered her hand to Hannah, who was looking delighted to take it. Night, Kita. Don't work too hard. And then we've got 2 chapters left. So now we get Vane's first date with Hannah, and we've got a little drama setting up for Falling with Apple, which is probably a book I won't read on this channel until I rewrite it. There was a lot that happened with Tate's book that I was just like, I need to fix some of that before I read it to the universe. If you want to read it before I edit it, it's still on Amazon. Anyway, if you like this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Remember to tell a friend, leave a comment, watch another video, go outside, get a walk, get a snack, take care of yourself, take your meds, and drink some water, and I'll see you next time.